What? He makes movies too now?
Yeah, I heard so too.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Chaka chaka. What is he doing? What is he going to do now? Well, earlier I dusted off my carpet, just opened the window because I'm somewhere, 3rd floor or something. Just put it out of the window. You make sure you don't drop it, because these things are a little heavy. And you also make sure you don't fall out of the window. Yeah, I dusted it off and then I let it lie there a little. And now I just made a post on Instagram and on Medium. It's called Dream Kitchen. Now when you are going to watch this, we're already somewhere in July. Just so you know, I'm working ahead so that I'm a little ahead of schedule, because that gives me more time to say, okay, maybe I'm gonna write these books that I still want to write, alright? Now, I'm a little bit nervous, not really bad nervous, just a little bit, because there is an issue I have with my action cam at the moment. And the way it looks like is that, you know, I'm not sure, because previously, because I have a micro SD card with, I think, 64 gigabyte for my action cam, and I have this adapter, and then I have a micro SD card or an SD card adapter which you connect via USB. And I can put either the micro SD card into the micro SD/SD connector, or I can put the micro SD card into an SD card adapter. It's so complicated. And then I can put it into the SD card slot. So the adapter for SD cards also works for micro SD cards. And no matter how I connect it, because I use Linux, every time, and the SD card is formatted as exFAT, which doesn't have this quirk that you can only copy files of a certain size, right? It doesn't have that. So it has been working fine, and then one day, because now I made really nice recordings, and when I try to copy them, so I put in the SD card or the micro SD card, right? Either the SD card adapter with the micro SD card inside of it, or the micro SD card, because there are 2 slots in the USB to SD micro SD card adapter, right? It works for both. And when I put it in, Linux shows me the files, but when I'm trying to watch it, it says something like error splicing file, and then a double point, and then it says cannot, or endpoint connection is missing or something. And I've tried to look it up online, but I really have the feeling that there is something wrong with the adapter, the USB to micro/SD card adapter. So what I have to do is I have to check it with another one at some point, just to make sure that the SD card is not broken. And that's what I sometimes really don't like with working with electronics, all these little quirks. And so at the moment, what I use is my DLSR, which I said I actually didn't want to use anymore, because I'm afraid that one will break as well. You know, it's like I'm very clingy. Sure, if that one breaks, I'm gonna use my phone. And if that one breaks as well, well then I will use the webcam. And when my laptop breaks, well then I'm screwed. You see, I'm a little bit anxious because I cannot just replace things at the moment. You know, I don't have thousands of euros. And even if I were to get a job now, I don't have thousands of euros. And even if I would have thousands of euros, if my laptop breaks, then what? I mean, you cannot just have 2 laptops, because that's like the pinnacle of anxiety. Because usually the way it works that, you know, your laptop breaks gradually. It just suddenly starts working less good, and then you realize, oh, I think it's about time to get a new one. But I don't know at what stage I'm at the moment. I have the feeling there's something wrong with the micro SD card. And then I work with that. Then I say, all right, what can I do about it? Nothing. At the moment I can literally do nothing. Because also I don't have enough knowledge of computers and SD cards that I can just freely do this. And at the moment I feel so riled up and anxious that I also don't have the patience to find a solution. And maybe it's because I'm drinking a lot of black tea. Holy moly, black tea just really riles you up. But the reason I'm drinking black tea is because it keeps me going. You know, I make black tea. For 1 liter I use 2 heaped teaspoons of black tea. And then I let it sit for several hours. I also add ginger into this. And I also add a mixture which is called Vata, which comes from Ayurveda. And it also has cinnamon in there and coriander, but also sweet wood, and it really riles you up. I mean, it riles you up. I'm telling you that it riles you up. And so at the moment, you know, all the equipment that I have is a little bit quirky. Right? It's like the microphone I have, which costs something like 333 euros. It's quite a good one. The brand is Zoom. That's the brand I would like to name for my action cam. You can figure that one out for yourself. But it also tells me something at the moment, because if my action cam would be working, then what would I do? I would continue to use it. I would make videos with my action cam. But now life comes and says, well, Sonny, your action cam isn't working at the moment. So what do? Do you stop? Or do you continue? Because this is my only outlet. I can make art, but I also want to talk, right? So what do? I use my DLSR. Because that's what I have available. It makes videos in a different format. It gives a different feel to it. I also like it that way. Right? I like to change things. And I also need to be flexible. So at the moment I don't walk around and talk. But I can still bring my camera, my DLSR, and then take pictures and then make videos with that. So maybe right now, it's not the time to record videos with my action cam. And that's the beauty of having little or almost no money. But even if you have money, you can still do it like this. You can just say, instead of just buying everything all the time, you know, I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna be patient and I can see what else can I use. I'll make videos with my phone then, right? I'll use another camera, I use my webcam, because what I really want is to keep going. And these trousers, right, the zipper broke. And I just stitched it together, and it's so cool because it's like, that's rebellion, man. I mean, just think of the message that sends to women. It's like, do you dare? I mean, it's like, you want to get to this? Well, and now this one broke. And what most people would do is they would either bring it to a tailor, or they would just chuck it. Well, I say I'm just gonna fix it, because that's how I roll, right? If something breaks, I fix it. And I've already used this here once, because we have so many of these bags. And it's a very thick, it's cotton, it's good material. Now this time I'm not quite sure, but I think I would rather put this on the inside, because if I put it on the outside it just... Yeah, because that's not a problem. If I put it on the inside, then it may be that it creates more friction. Because I have, right, I walk a lot, and I have a very fast pace, and I also jump around and stuff, right? I jump on things, so I need my trousers to withstand a lot of pressure. And the funny thing is that at some point I bought Fjällräven pants, and I had the same problem. That after about less than a year, this happened to trousers which I bought for 140 euros. That's like supposed to be top notch. And they broke. I mean, can you explain this to me? And that was not just the light fabric one. That was also the one that, I don't know the name, but like one of the very basic, very sturdy, supposedly sturdy ones. And that one broke as well down here. And now I have trousers that I bought from an army shop. And I paid roughly like 40 euros for them. And they're tougher than Fjällräven will ever be. Maybe Fjällräven started out being tough. But for some reason, they just don't work for me. Now these I got from the guy who wants to be my brother, but doesn't know how to, right? Because brothers should look out for each other. And I think I did that a lot. Like, I take a lot of hits for other people, but they don't notice it. And if they notice it, they never show it because they're too proud. So now I have to find a way to make this into a shape that I like, right? And right now there's a video rendering. I'll just want to check how long it's going to take. Alright, it says 2 hours and 48, but I can guarantee you that it's going to take longer than that. I guarantee you that it probably will take about, 9 to 10 hours with my laptop at the moment. And why is that? Because I took a video, it's one of those meditation. It's meditation, I think, something with distance, look into the distance, or well, it's meditation 12. So now the question is, of course, also of color. I want to take this one. So you see, I don't really have an interest to hide that I'm patching up my pants. So the question is, do I really have to? Well, because this is already used up. So now this is going to be a bit of a hack job. What I wanted to say is, because half of the video, you know, I used the recording of the surrounding landscape, which is beautiful, by the way. And the first half, because my camera, the DSLR, only takes half-hour videos. And the meditation ones are always 1 hour long. So it's the first half, it's the video the way it has been recorded. And then the second half, I reverse the clip. So that it's like, you know, it starts and it ends where it started, right? It's like this then. So the second half of the meditation video is the recording I made, but reversed. And that takes my laptop, or any laptop, it's much more computing that has to be done. Yeah? It takes, like, you can already tell when you're trying to play the clip. When I play the clip in its original direction, then it just plays smoothly. And when I reverse it, it's like frame by frame. And now think about it, how many frames there are per second. And usually, depending on how many filters and effects you put onto a video clip, yeah, it goes faster or slower. So if you have almost no filters, it basically renders it with maybe, 14 frames per second. And when you have a lot of effects and like reverse the clip, then it's like 1 frame per second. That means 1 frame per second, if you have half an hour, that's a lot of frames at that speed. Because 1 frame per second, this video now has, I think, how much is it? 25 frames per second. That means, wow, it's so complicated. You have 1 frame per second rendering speed, and 1 second of the video has 25 frames. Hey, wait. When it's 1 frame per second, oh yeah, then it takes 25 seconds to render 1 second of the video. Which means if you have, it's basically times 25 then. So if you have 30 minutes of reversed clip, then you have to take that times 25. And if you want to make that a little easier when you want to calculate it, you can say, alright, so if I have 30 minutes of reversed clip, if I double that, it's 1 hour. So if I have 25 times 30 minutes, I would have, you don't have to be exact, 12 times 1 hour. So it could even be that it takes 12 hours. Right, I've rendered videos that were 15 hours because my laptop, like I said, it's very slow. Alright. Now it's also interesting that I use this one. And it's also interesting that I use this one because it's so thick. It's not too thick, but I did already use it for other pants, and there I did have the feeling it actually is too thick. But for me, it's just gonna keep it together, right? And that's the one thing that I have to say. If you do these kind of things DIY, it is complicated. You will feel like, right? So it's like when you want to calculate how many frames per second, blah, 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 how long it's going to take to render something at a certain speed, you know, I feel like I'm going nuts for a while. So if I try to think about how I'm supposed to do this, you know, I can only think to a certain degree. At one point, I just have to do it, right? It's like these hangings you've seen in my room. You know, I can lay out the patchwork, but when I have to actually stitch it together, yeah. You know, I'm not a professional tailor or something, right? You know, I can do things fairly well, but I also have to be aware that I don't really want to ruin those pants as well. I actually like them. But, right, I mean, if I try it and it breaks, well, then it's broken. But it's already broken. So, you know, that's what, when you try to fix something, you don't know if you're going to fix it or just make it worse. And that's the position I'm in with my SD card, right? I don't want to break it. So I also don't just want to do things because I like the videos that I made, which means I want to keep them. So, right, you see, if you put this on there, you know, people are going to see it. Now, while this looks incredibly sexy, patching up the back just looks a bit weird. Yeah? So I think I'm just going to stick with it because as much as I want to say, you know, I'm not about style and that I don't mind, I do have a sense for what looks good and what doesn't look good. So what I probably, right, I prefer this. Because now what am I gonna do? This is too long anyway. I like this fabric, it's really thick. And I'm just gonna see how much do I really need. Like if I put it like this, it's exactly how it's supposed to be. And that's also why I like doing these things by myself, because if I would go to my mother, she fusses a lot. Or the woman that thinks she's my mother, right? This is for me an important step in distancing myself of this worldly heritage and to not get overly drawn into family affairs, right? I want to keep my distance. That to me is important for my own personal spiritual development and my development as a man. Because if I keep thinking of my father as, I don't know, a man to look up to, I may not see some of the things that he is just... Oh wow, you don't actually see this. That's funny. There. Right. So now I showed you things. So now I turned the trousers around. And now I have to line it up. Right. And because I don't want to do things sloppy anymore. Not too sloppy anyway. You know, just a bit sloppy for me is fine. But this fabric is basically, what this is supposed to do is just keep it together. Yeah, it's just gonna assist and reduce the amount of friction. Now, how long that's gonna hold, yeah. These trousers are basically done. But because they're basically done, you know, I can fiddle around with them a little, right? I can just see what comes out of this, or what wants to come out of this. Now, I would like to do it like this. And now all I have to do is just take it. But first, what I actually would like to do is make sure that this stays the way it is. So I have a needle somewhere. It's good to have a place actually. I have more needles. I don't know where they are. Yeah. So for this, my feeling says I actually can just take a smaller thread. Because this is just to hold. So this thread is, I think it's more like nylon, but it's very strong. So yeah, I just use what I have available. I have to check. It's just sometimes, yeah. This also looks really beautiful. So you can take pictures while you're shooting. That's also quite nice, right? Anyway, right, sometimes life is really weird. Sometimes really weird things happen. Sometimes I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. Actually, it's mostly like this. Right? It's just like I'm clinging to certain things. I have a feeling about certain things. But until that feeling shows me, oh wow, look at this, that's how it is, I don't really know. I mean, that doesn't make much sense, but it makes to me. It's like with women, right? It's like the eternal problem that I have with women. Right? That I don't know which one. Right? If the thread is the woman and I'm the needle, then I'm still looking for the thread. I have a feeling, but like I said, I'm still testing life a little. And whatever comes, I'm just gonna see how far it wants to go. Because if I sit around and I think I know, I have to admit at one point that I don't know. Which is true, I actually don't know. Until it reveals itself to me. Right, and sometimes I meet women and I think, oh, they're nice, and then I ask them if they want to do something with me. Because yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The chance is very high that if I'm alone overnight with a woman and we like each other, the chance is at least a little bit high that we're gonna have sex. And that's what, at the moment, I feel like that's what I want. or I'm trying to have it. You know, I'm not sure if I actually want it, but if it's there and it feels good, I would do it. But only if it feels good. And yesterday I was listening to Terence McKenna, and that's also something. When you have an opportunity, for instance, right? Because yeah, I mean, he's the kind of the mushroom guy, right? But if you do psychedelics with a woman that you actually don't really like, then you should be aware that this may lead to having sex. Because what happens, right, you take psychedelics in nature, you become one with nature. If you take psychedelics with a woman, you become one with that woman. And that's why I sometimes made an active choice to say, I was part of some groups that did ayahuasca. I wasn't really a part of them. But what I saw was how much they got drawn into each other. Because they clung to this group to do ayahuasca together. It's a very bad habit. Because ultimately, you know, they just formed these really weird love relationships with each other. And I found that very disgusting. Because you can surely see that these people would have orgies at some point. Or even had them already. Everybody's just fucking around with each other. Because they don't know how to separate themselves. And that's where I really disagree with Terence McKenna, because he says that there were times where it was normal to take mushrooms, and that during these times people were, he says, right, that's his projection of what he thinks from his own experience, how it must have been, right? It's like his stone ape theory. That society was more like orgiastic. I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because I don't like this. I don't like orgiastic. The idea of just having sex with lots of people. You know, I'm more monogamous. That doesn't mean, you know, I sleep once with someone and then I will sleep with nobody else. What it means to me is, if I'm with a woman, then I'm with a woman. While I am together with a woman and I have sex with her, I don't sleep around with other women. But when the relationship ends and there's just nothing going on in that direction anymore, then I move on. But before I move on, I make sure that it's really over. And that's the really hard part. Right? It's like, okay, when do you let go? Right? If I get the message, this woman really doesn't want it, then at one point, I let go. And that's also hard. To a certain point. But sometimes it's simply necessary. So I wait, and when the woman really doesn't want it anymore, for whatever reason, and she goes to great lengths to avoid me, then I say, okay, I've tried, I've done my best. I kept reaching out, I kept suggesting things, I kept sending her my number and my, right, but she just doesn't want it. Then I say, all right. And at this point, I don't really care how old somebody is. I mean, it shouldn't be a little child. Because I recognize that inside, there is a soul, there is a being that has nothing to do with age. Right? Because if I look at the man that thinks he's my father, what I see is, to me, he's not really a man. He's a prepubescent, traumatized person thing that just holds on to all his trauma, which makes him a little child. Because when he walks around the house, he's just openly farting. And right, if I sit in the kitchen, or I used to sit in the kitchen, he would come in and just drop a fart. Because he thinks it's funny. Or what he really wants is he wants to get a laugh out of others, right? He wants to be funny, he wants to get attention. You know, but there's a better way of getting attention. Yes, sometimes my stitches are a little bit wider than what you would call professional. But you could also say, well, that's just my own style. So you see, yeah, I can't really look up to a man that farts while other people are eating. Because it's his problem, right? Because what happened was, I just didn't want to eat anymore in his presence, because it's disgusting. He looks at my food and he thinks it's disgusting. And I have to eat it then. So what I did was, I sometimes was hiding the food from him even, right? I would make the food and then I would go to my room. But already the thought of the food standing in the kitchen and one of them going there, looking at it and saying and thinking, ugh, what's this? You know, I have to eat it then. And I just don't want it anymore. I just didn't want this anymore. So sometimes I would just cook during the night. And then I would make smaller portions so that they couldn't look at my food. So I also don't really want to invite them here at the moment, because sometimes you just need distance. Sure, they would probably like to come here. I'm just going to stretch it out a little. Yeah, a little bit to a little bit much. So yeah, I cannot sit here and just worry all the time if the camera is still recording. Yeah, this also, it seems a bit like a futile attempt to save trousers. You know, I could also just chuck them, because I actually don't think it's going to last long. Because trousers these days, they're just made of really thin fabric. Yeah, and only people that just sit around on chairs can make such trousers last a long time. But I have an active lifestyle, yeah. I jump around on things. You know, I jump on top of things. That means the trousers need to be a little bit more robust than for the average person. And I don't really buy a lot of things, but because people buy a lot of things, right, they then give me their old things. So this sweater isn't mine. Okay, these I did buy, but this I got from somebody else. So at one point you actually realize you don't really have to buy anything at all anymore, because other people are buying things all the time. And that's, right, where I say I'm an opportunist. You know, in that sense, I'm like a monkey. If I see an opportunity, I seize it. If I meet a woman, right, that's 18, but I don't know that, you know, I just meet a being, somebody that I like. and I talk to her. And then it turns out she's 18. Well, is that a problem? I mean, there are people who get married, they are 30 years apart. And she's 18, so legally in this weird system, she's an adult, right? She's self-responsible in a way. And I have no evil intent towards her. You know, I just want to love someone. And that's the truth. What I really want is a woman that I can love, that I can be with, and that I can build a life with. And I've tried loving lots of women, believe me, they all didn't want it. Right? You know, women that usually were younger than me. For some reason, I want my wife to be younger than me. But the thing is, how young is young then? Right? How young? Well, I say it doesn't matter. Because when there's love between the two of you, enough love to build a family, well, why does it matter how old somebody is? You know, I really mean that. And that's where some people, they say, well, it's just sick. Look at this, look at that. But it's because all these people are insecure. They have weird ideas about what love is. Right? If a 16-year-old girl falls in love with a 40-year-old man, and the love is pure, then they should be allowed to love each other. Why do people say that it's sick? Because they don't understand what it means to be a soul. They just see age and body. But the soul has no age. The soul is eternal. And that's why when I meet someone, you know, sure, I want to build a family. What does that mean to me? It means I'm not looking for a woman that's really old. Because I want a woman that can still give child. Because the body does play a part. Although the soul is eternal, the body is still important. And I just happen to feel like I'm attracted to young women. Younger women. And what I realized is that as much as you can have a man that on paper is 60 years old, he just acts like a teenage boy. And then you have a man that is on paper 30 years old, and he's more mature and more developed and more truthful than the man that is 60 on paper. So what does age really say? It says nothing. Right? It's like in the book Journey to Islam, which I only listened to as an audiobook until now, but I really want to read it myself. Because there's a different way of learning when you read it to yourself. It says, right, Carlos Castaneda asks Don Juan, how old are you? And Don Juan answers, how old I want to be. Right? If I have power, I'm young. If I have no power, you know, I will be really fat and old very fast. So how do you store power? By doing things like this. This looks ridiculous to one of these westernized men who are not men but pubescent boys, right? They shave their beards, they drive around in cars, they sit all day, and they are actually weak. So because they're weak, they have to pride themselves with material possessions. So they say, I have a house, I have a car, you know, this is this and this is that, this is my child. But it takes more to be a father than to just pay the bills. So in that sense, you can say, I grew up without a father. So I had to become my own parent. Because my parents, they don't really care about what's good for me. They just cared about being worshipped. Right? I don't really want to be worshipped. I want to worship life. And that's how it used to be. People worship life by living. And now people basically worship death by just sitting around, stuffing themselves with food and decaying from the inside. So if the man that thinks he's my father would have lived a different life, if he wouldn't just wanted to drive cars all the time, but would have just said, you know, I'm going to walk, I'm going to do my exercises. You know, this is how it's been described in Autobiography of a Yogi, where Sri Yukteswar gives the father of Ananda, how was his name? Yogananda. He gives him a certain series of exercises that he has to do. It's like it's a kriya for yoga. I think you call it like this. It's a series of exercises that you do for spiritual enlightenment. Because every day you suffer. I wake up, I suffer. So what do I do to work with my suffering? Well, I do something. This is one of the things that's part of sadhana, of spiritual work. Right? I'm anxious. I feel insecure about doing this. But it's a project that I can do. It's DIY, it's weaving my own energy to make use of what I have. Right? This is like weaving the thread of my life. You know, this is showing something. I appreciate what I have been given, and I make sure that I make use of it to the best of my abilities. So I have certain things that I have, cameras or something, and when it breaks, you know, I at least think about if I could fix it. It's like what I said, what broke on my microphone. I don't have the knowledge to fix it, or the know-how, or the experience. And in a way, that's okay for me. I just work around it, because I can still use the microphone. Even though there is a loose contact, you know, I can still power it if I, you know, plug the thing into the microphone and then find the right position so that it works. And maybe the relationships I had previously, they just weren't meant to be or something, right? I don't know if that exists, right? A part of me says, give life a chance. And life introduced me to somebody else that I feel attracted to. And I cannot control this, who I love. There's just love, a lot of it. And it wants to go somewhere. I don't know for how long, but I'm prepared to let it go where it wants to go for the rest of my life. Because I say, if I love a woman, then I love her. I love her no matter what. But she also has to want my love. And until now, all the women I met, they were afraid of my love, because it's a lot. I have a lot to give, and that's what you can see from my content. There's no end to it. But I also worked hard to get there, right? Because I wanted to give, and I was reluctant to give in. Give in to not giving. I said I want to keep giving because that's what really feels good. And now suddenly people start giving as well. Right? It's like the man that thinks he's my father or whatever. He suddenly starts giving. He gives me this apartment. And I take it because it's not money, right? It's not about money. Because money never really meant anything to me. And that's why, sure man, you want to pay me an apartment, do it. And I'm going to use it as best as I can. And that's why I do everything DIY in here. I make my own hangings for the windows. I will build my own kitchen. I've started already, but it takes some time to gather the money for the wood and stuff. You know, so one bar of wood at a time. That's how I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to earn my right to have a kitchen. I'm going to build it with my own energy. And I'll see how long I'm going to live in this apartment. Maybe I'm going to live here for the rest of my life. I don't know. It certainly would be much cheaper than buying a house, right? People always say, yeah, if you have a house, you save money. But it's actually a lie. Because if I have a house, I also have to spend a lot of money, right? It just makes you feel powerful to have a house. But when you have a house, you also have much higher costs. And that's why I'm just going to pause. Alright. Now I also know that it's going to keep recording. Because the battery usually lasts only for about two recording cycles. So I can record for 1 hour, or I can take I don't know how many pictures. Anyway, so when you have a house, you have to think of all the kind of tax things, right? You have to paint it. You have to, a house costs a lot of money. And then you have to be afraid to lose it. And you need a credit. And because you have a credit, you have to work for many decades to pay it off. So what if I just live in an apartment? Then they say, yeah, but if the rent rises? Well, if the rent rises, then it rises because the costs for oil or whatever you use to heat also rose. And when the rent rises, then also other things. You know, maybe water prices have increased, heating prices have increased, and the value of money has decreased, right? And that means that if I pay more rent, then the house also costs more money. And that means ultimately I actually don't save anything. Because what also the beautiful thing about just renting is that you can leave whenever you want. You don't have to think about selling the house. You can just cancel the contract and say, okay, in so many months I'm going to move out. And all you have to do is think about your apartment. So now I have 3 rooms and a bathroom. I could live here with a woman and a child, even 2 children. Believe me, I could do this. I don't need 25 rooms because I don't have such a giant, you could say ego, but what you could also say is I don't need that much space anymore. I could live here with other people. And I would feel good by myself, but that only works if these people also like being in my presence. And that's why I'm going to make sure that whatever woman wants to be with me really wants to be with me. In the original sense of marriage, I love you so much, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And that's all we need, right? I don't need to go to the state and have them declare our marriage, because when we bond, then we're married. And that's That's how it works. And that takes courage. And I cannot say, because like I said, there are women who are 26, there are women who are 35, there are women who are I don't know what. And some of them, to me, they're like children. And then you meet someone who's much younger than you know, on paper, but you can see in their soul they're already so mature. That's the really weird thing. And that's why I really give it my all. And it really hurts if you poured a lot of love into a woman and in the end she just doesn't want it anyway. And in that sense, it doesn't matter in which form the love comes. Because if the love comes in a scream and it manages to scare the woman away, then what it shows you is that her love wasn't really honest. And that's then all there is to it. Right? So, you know, if somebody wants to scream, then you either manage to love them anyway, or you don't. But to me, there's always a certain kind of consequence. And I just really want to make sure I know if somebody likes me or not. And I still haven't figured out how to know who that is. So I have several open tabs, you could say, with women where I say they could be it. But they, you know, just doesn't seem like they really want to be it. And if they would come now and say, hey, I want to be it, I would say, well, then prove it to me. Show me that you really want this. Unless you show me that you really want this, there's no chance that this is going to work. Because if you don't really want this, then we're just going to run into trouble. And you're never really going to trust me. And I need a woman to trust me because, right, that's for me also what spirituality is about. Hey. But the most important thing is to just stop with all the hate, yeah? That's the most important thing, to say, alright, whoever wants to love me can love me. Okay. But to me, it's just essential that it's honest. And I'm not going to run after women because if they want it, they have to also come towards you. And that's hard. That takes a lot of patience and practice. And at the moment, I really don't care. Because one woman is all women. That's basically something that comes from spirituality, where you say, you know, I can see myself in other people, right? I can see myself in my father, I can see myself in the man who thinks he's my father. Because if all is one, then we are all one in a way. And so if there's a woman that I think, oh, she must be my wife, you know, I can meet that woman in another form, because all women are one woman, because all women are nature. Yeah? I just have to find the version of her that wants to be with me. And that matches me, and I think I've gotten fairly close. But you also have to earn this, right? If you scream at women, they're going to not want to be with you. Right? So maybe all the women I tried to be with until now, maybe I just screwed it up. Maybe. Or maybe they just didn't really want it. Right? I can't say. But it takes two to have a family. It takes two to have children. And to me, adopting is not the only thing, because I need a woman in my life. That's just what's really important. And now let's see what I've created here, because I don't know how it's going to look like from the other side. So I'm just gonna Alright. So at least the hole is shut. It keeps it together. But yeah, if I would have put it over the outside, then it would have also helped with the friction. But for me, this is okay. Right, if I wear it now, maybe also I'm not gonna jump around too much, right? Maybe these are trousers which I wear just to do normal things. Whatever normal is, but right? It's like that's how it could work. To just do normal things once in a while and to just let things develop. Anyway, this is what I had to say. Yeah. As much as 4K seems to be the real hype, this camera has already lasted much longer and more safely than any of these modern things. Which says something about technology. You know, the more simple something is, the longer it's going to last. And if a relationship just seems overly complicated and you just can't communicate properly and you already start by shouting at each other, that's my experience now, then it's probably already doomed. Maybe. You know, I'm not one to give up easily, but you already have a feeling at one point, does she really want it or not? But I don't know, right? You still don't know. Just have to see what happens. Anyway, I'm getting a little tired of talking about this.